Welcome to the Jamie and Stephen Show. Let's talk movies, music and magic. Now today is a special bonus episode to accompany our main show. Throughout the Renaissance era, I personally wanted to take an in-depth look at some parts of the films that didn't quite fit in with the main podcast. Today, we're going to journey back to the 1980s, and most specifically, the LGBTQ+ aspects of The Little Mermaid. Throughout the history of Disney, there has always been a huge following from the LGBTQ+ community. Over the years since the company's creation, not only has homosexuality been legalized, but has grown in acceptance and has an increased presence in pop culture. Quite frankly, the world has much further to go when it comes to how it treats the members of the community. Great big steps have been made over the last century, but there are still great big steps to make. It is important to note that the way women are treated and viewed has also changed in the same time period. In some senses, the two are similar, but in others, they are poles apart. Unfortunately, in recent years, the two groups have come to clash in some areas, but to say this is true of all members of each community would be an outright lie. In 1980s America, gay and lesbians were still hidden in the background of pop culture. In the UK, singers such as George Michael, Boy George and Pete Burns were at the top of their game, although only the latter two being open about their sexuality at the time. Elsewhere in pop culture, artists such as Andy Warhol were open and influential. For actors, the role of romantic lead prevented many men from coming out in fear it may hurt their careers. It has only been in the last few years where this notion is slightly changing, most notably with Jonathan Bailey. But in the momentum, something was brewing in the background that would not only take away many of the great stars of the time and future, but would set back the public perception of gay people by decades. AIDS, after all, was presented as a gay disease. For those who want to know more about this part of the decade, I recommend watching It's a Sin by celebrated gay writer Russell T. Davies. The disease took the life of many beloved gay performers. Looking back now through the eyes of 2024, the way it was handled seems just alien. We lost people like Rock Hudson, Freddie Mercury, Dan Hartman, who was a co-writer of Why Should I Worry from Oliver & Company, and Howard Ashman. Ashman was born on the 17th of May 1950 in Baltimore. Whilst at school, he started his link with the theatre with the Children's Theatre Association. He starred in various plays, including playing the role of Peter Pan. As time went on, he continued learning the arts, although this time it was a master's degree in fine arts rather than anything directly theatre-based. He graduated Indiana University in 1974, the year after the Disney film Robin Hood was released. Incidentally, one of the earlier examples of the LGBTQ+ contributions to the Disney animated classics. Brian Bedford, the voice behind Robin Hood, identified as gay, marrying his husband in 2013. Howard Ashman then moved to New York, working as an editor at Grosset and Dunlap. The publishers were known for producing children's books, something they still do today, although they are part of the Penguin Publishing House. Cause Maggie's Afraid of the Dark and Dream Stuff were his first two produced plays, both of which received mixed reviews. In 1977, whilst The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh and the Rescuers were hitting the cinemas, Ashman's play The Confirmation was on at Princeton McCarter's Theatre. The play starred Herschel Bernardi, who appeared in the 1986 episode of The Magical World of Disney. Also in 1977, Ashman became the artistic director of the WPA Theatre in New York. It was during the 2-year educational program at the BMI Musical Theatre Workshop that Ashman met Alan Menken. The two worked on a 1979 musical called Kirk Vonnegut's God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater. The two also worked on Little Shop of Horrors, which premiered off-Broadway in 1982. It moved on to off-Broadway soon after, where it had a 5-year run. The musical was based on the 1960s low-budget black comedy film of the same name. It eventually moved on to Broadway, and in 1986, Frank Oz, the voice of Miss Piggy and Yoda, directed a feature film version. The film featured a cameo by John Candy, who Disney fans would recognise as Irv from Cool Runnings, and Wilbur in The Rescuers Down Under. Ashman's next musical, Smile, was not well received. Opening in 1986, it closed just after 48 performances in January 1987. The musical starred Jodie Benson, who went on to play Ariel in The Little Mermaid, Barbie in the Toy Story franchise, and Weebo in the 1990s Robin Williams comedy film Flubber. Benson sung a song called Disneyland, something she did again as part of Bruce Kimmel's album Unsung Musicals. For interested fans, the album Howard Sings features Ashman songs sung by Ashman from Smile. Also in 1986, Ashman was brought aboard to work on Oliver and Company, writing the opening song Once Upon a Time in New York City. For a couple of years, the studios had been working on another story, The Little Mermaid. Alan Menken was also brought aboard, and the two wrote all of the songs for the musical film. The Little Mermaid rode on the waves made by Oliver and Company and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It is noted as the start of the Disney Renaissance and helped save the animation studio from ceasing production on new feature films. Ashman and Menken would go on to write music for Beauty and the Beast, which would take the company to new heights. Ashman would then make a suggestion to make a film based on the story Aladdin. He wrote 16 songs for this, 3 of which made it into the finished film. In 1988, during the production of The Little Mermaid, Howard received the diagnosis of HIV/AIDS. Disney supported him while he went for treatment and setting up production near his home in New York. He continued to write songs for Beauty and the Beast, despite wanting to work on his Aladdin concept. On March the 14th, 1991, Howard Ashman passed away in New York at the age of just 40. He never got to see the success of Beauty and the Beast, passing before its release. The film does end with a dedication to him. To our friend Howard, who gave a mermaid her voice and a beast his soul, we will be forever grateful. His story doesn't end there. In 1992, he won an Oscar for his contribution to Beauty and the Beast. It was collected by his widower partner Bill Loach, who he had met in 1984. A small feature was also included in the DVD release of Beauty and the Beast, and a documentary was produced by Disney, simply called Howard, in 2018. It became available on Disney Plus in 2020. Behind the scenes, another member of the LGBTQ+ community was busy building a career and advancing Disney animation. Andreas Deja worked for Disney, starting with The Black Cauldron, sharing a cubicle with Tim Burton. His contribution to The Little Mermaid was small compared to later work, but he would go on to produce some of the best-known Disney characters of all times. He continues to honour Disney animation through books and his blog, and he has almost had a secondary career being the historian of the original 9 Old Men. Always one to appear on making-ofs and documentaries, he was a main fixture for Disney animation in the 1990s and 2000s. It is important to note that homosexuality was illegal in all states up until 1962. This changed as the years went on, and the remaining states, Texas, removed any homophobic laws in 2003. To put this into context, the following events occurred whilst these laws were still in effect somewhere in the USA. The millennium, 9/11, LGBT laws changed in Australia, South Africa and the UK, the opening of Disneyland Paris, Animal Kingdom and Tokyo Disneyland, as well as the death of Princess Diana. With this in mind, members of the LGBTQ+ community sought refuge in different states. New York then became a hotspot for the community, and a rise in gay culture began. Stonewall was probably one of the most major events in American history, and should be a prime example of injustice in recent history too. The gay culture created a wave of entertainment and continues to have a place in pop culture today. Celebrities such as RuPaul were born into this era, and the LGBTQ+ community owes a great deal of gratitude to those men, women and trans lives. Divine was known as drag artist. Her humour and appearance seems a little bit niche in today's world, but at the time she was breaking barriers that many artists are still trying to burst through even today. A group of entertainers clicked together, including Divine, John Waters and Howard Ashman. Their stamp on culture continues with films, programmes, stage shows and music. From their influences and how they inspired future generations, they have made one of the biggest impacts on popular culture. Every day we may not compare them to Madonna, Marvel or Game of Thrones, but their quiet contribution enabled drag to break through. Musicals and animation would also return to the forefront. Divine, a drag queen, became the inspiration for Ursula. The look of the Sea Witch was everything Divine. One of the most popular Disney villains of all time has her roots in gay culture. In terms of breaking through the barriers and paving the way, this should be considered one of the biggest at the time. The size of the audience was huge and showed the world how amazing drag was. Something that has continued across the world with performers like Paul O'Grady's Lily Savage and shows like RuPaul's Drag Race. The original Little Mermaid story has also been noted to have been based on a gay love story. Hans Christian Andersen, the author, fell for a gentleman called Edward Cullen. The love was unrequited and Colin married a woman. However, Andersen wrote many romantic letters to Colin. But as the love was not returned, it would have caused significant heartache for him. Homosexuality was stigmatized at the time, and many frowned upon any relationships. In the journals of Andersen, he quotes instances of falling for both men and women. Some have contested this, stating that his love was simply as an idolization rather than affection. However, reading the text, it's very clear what Andersen meant by loving relationships and entering is erotic era when coupled up with a man. Talking of the original story, the character of Ursula was not prominent in the original Hans Christian Andersen story, but was made so in the Disney animated feature. Howard Ashman's opinion of the character was based on a soap stereotype. This was the 80s after all. American soap operas were big, especially the likes of Dallas and Dynasty. The latter must have been the favourite of his, as he liked the character of Alexis Carrington. In the original soap, the role was played by Joan Collins. Collins was a British actress who found fame as the troublesome bitch in Dynasty. She was known for her catfight, glamour, and over-the-top slaps. She was so much of an inspiration that Howard was even keen on having Collins voice the Sea Witch. Disney Animation was not the powerhouse that they are today. Throughout the decade of the 80s, the studios only produced The Fox and the Hound, The Black Cauldron, and Basil the Great Mouse Detective. Although all three have cult followings today, at the time they were not considered successes. The big blockbusters were live action, although some did include animatronics, such as Star Wars, E.T. and Ghostbusters. Collins's agent was not too happy at their client being asked to play a witch, and turned it down on her behalf. Another consideration came in the form of B. Arthur. Arthur, an established comedian, is best remembered for her role as Dorothy in the hit comedy The Golden Girls. The series was a huge success, especially within the gay community. The programme ended in the early 1990s, but is still a major part of gay culture now. Again, the role was turned down. Other considerations included comedian Roseanne Barr and other comedian Jennifer Saunders. Barr is a member of the LGBTQ plus community, whereas Saunders became a gay icon from the 1990s, writing and starring in Absolutely Fabulous. The role was eventually given to Broadway star Elaine Stritch. Stritch started a career in the 1940s. She appeared in many plays and musicals, although people in the UK may recognise her as one of the leads in the sitcom Two's Company. Stritch and Ashman clashed on how the role should be played. She was also an alcoholic at the time, which had affected her work. When she left, the role was then given to Pat Carroll. As I said before, the character has gone down in history as one of the best villains. Her campness is one of the things that differentiates her from other villainesses. This isn't just the visual appearance, as mentioned before, but the way the character is played, an aspect that Pat Carroll herself attributes to Ashman. The Little Mermaid has gone down in history as one of the greatest Disney films of all time. It is recognised as helping saving the animation studios and became perceived start of the celebrated Disney Renaissance. Through Howard Ashman and his background, the film differentiated itself from previous work. Before this, the company made films with music, but from this point onwards, they made musicals. The studios went from strength to strength over the next decade and produced some of the biggest films of the 1990s and of a generation. But The Little Mermaid owes a lot to the LGBTQ+ community. Not only those who developed it, those who inspired parts of it, but those who adored it as well. As the years continue to roll on, the inclusion of gay culture in the community has increased. Since the release, Disney has introduced a coming-out story on the Disney Channel, created a series depicting a gay teenager falling in love, expanded the High School Musical franchise to include more diversity, Openly gay and lesbian actors play major roles, Pixar introducing lesbian characters to their films, and in 2022, Disney Animation had their first gay lead. There's still a long way to go. Everything mentioned above resulted in many backlashes. But in 1989, The Little Mermaid made a start. A family film based on a metaphor for a gay relationship, produced and developed partly by an openly gay man, with characters based on drag queens and gay icons, and drawn by openly gay men. It became a huge success, and it should be acknowledged as the contribution gay culture made to not only this film, but to the whole Renaissance era and beyond.